The inaugural Miami Grand Prix was hyped up as being one of the biggest and best new races on the F1 calendar, but unfortunately the on-track race today didn't quite live up to the hype, and it was quite a dull race in places, and there was one big factor why. I'm Luke Smith, and this is Paddock Packdown. Well, as you can see, the Packdown is in full swing here in Miami. The champagne has been sprayed, and it was Max Verstappen and Red Bull celebrating another hard-earned victory today. Quite a lot going around me, as you can see. But the race itself, I think it left fans wanting a little bit more, and we got into a bit of a mid-race lull where there wasn't really a lot going on, not a lot of overtaking, not a lot of action. And for all of the pre-race build-up, a really busy grid, so many big names and celebrities on there as well. Ultimately, what F1 is defined by is the on-track product, and I think people would have wanted a bit more from that today. But what was the key factor behind it? Why didn't the Miami Grand Prix live up to the hype, and why, frankly, was it a bit of a dull race? The main reason for that was the track surface. Now, anytime we go to a new F1 circuit, obviously it's very difficult for them to get everything right, and the track surface is always a big challenge. After all, it's not like other series have raced there before, it's not like we go there every single season, so it is a big challenge for them to make it work for the drivers. Now, any track you go to, it's always going to be a bit less grippy when you go offline. The racing line is always going to offer optimal levels of grip to drivers. But here in Miami, a lot of drivers found that it was actually pretty extreme when they went off the circuit. Pierre Gasly, I asked him about it yesterday, what's it going to be like if you do go offline? And he said, it'll be ciao ciao for a few laps. And of course, we saw what happened with Gasly and Norris. Gasly running very wide due to a steering issue there. When the drivers completed their first runs on Friday, a lot of them actually compared the track to a go-kart circuit. They said it was very, very grippy when you were on the racing line, but if you went a little bit off, it was really, really difficult. And I think as we saw the weekend wear on, that didn't really go away. It wasn't like the track gripped in a lot all over the circuit, and even come the race, it was a big, big challenge for them. That meant drivers were a little more hesitant to go for overtakes. They weren't going to go for these big lunges that we might have seen. We saw Sergio Perez attempt one late on Carlos Sainz. It didn't quite work out for him. But otherwise, we didn't see anyone really, really gunning for it, anyone sending it up the inside or going for it around the outside, because frankly, there wasn't enough grip. If you did that, you were going to be paying the price for a few laps. You probably weren't going to get the position. And that is what really played a key role in making it such a dull race today. The drivers have been highlighting the issue with the track surface right the way through the race weekend. Fernando Alonso said it was not up to F1 standards. Sergio Perez, he was really punchy about it. He called it a joke. Daniel Ricciardo, he said it was a bit one-dimensional and that you could only follow that one racing line around. Now in qualifying, of course, that's not such a big issue because, after all, you're on your own, you're going for that lap. But in the race, when you want to be sending those overtakes, you want to be going for the lunges, you want to be making those really dramatic moves that I think so many people would have really loved to see to spice up the Miami Grand Prix, live up to the hype. It just wasn't forthcoming in the end, so it made it really, really difficult for the drivers to get any big overtakes done. When the race really got into its biggest lull, one of the big things a lot of fans were crying out for, and even people in the media centre actually, were saying this race really needs a safety car. And we did get one in the end. Lap 41, Lando Norris and Pierre Gasly had that coming together. Gasly had right rear damage from the crash with Fernando Alonso one lap earlier, meant he couldn't really get out of Norris's way. That sparked a safety car period, it bunched the field, a lot of drivers came into the pits to fit some fresh tyres, Sergio Perez, Kevin Magnussen, Daniel Ricciardo as well. And it gave us a bit of hope. It gave us some hope that, we might see another fight between Leclerc and Verstappen at the front of the pack. But again, that wasn't to be. Even with a huge tyre advantage that some of the drivers had, they couldn't get close, they couldn't get ahead. I asked Sergio Perez about this after the race. He pitted for mediums under the safety car, sat fourth on the road, but he had Verstappen, Leclerc and Sainz ahead of him, all on really old hard tyres. In truth, it should have given him the chance to at least close the gap and catch up and pass those guys. He said, look, I thought I was in a really, really good spot, but even he couldn't make much progress. Even with those massive, massive tyre advantages that some of the drivers had, it just simply wasn't enough. So I think that really does speak to the issues there were with the track in terms of going offline, not having enough grip. So even when you've got those fresher tyres, it just wasn't giving us enough action. We saw Charles Leclerc trying to hunt down Max Verstappen in the closing stages. They were quite similar on tyre life. But one of the big issues they faced as well was the track layout. Now, I know I said there was one factor, but we can't really talk about this race without talking about the Mickey Mouse chicane. That's to quote Daniel Ricciardo. The lap in Miami, it won praise universally from the drivers. They were really, really impressed by it. It took inspiration from a lot of classic F1 tracks. But the only part they didn't like was the chicane. That turn 14, 15, 16 section, very, very slow speeds. They had to make it slow because of the overpass that went over the track at that point of circuit. But it kind of killed the momentum when they were going around the lap. Pierre Gasly, he said it was a Formula E chicane, which kind of says a lot about that chicane. And all the drivers said that if they could change one thing, it would be that point of the circuit. Just to keep it going round, keep that fast-flowing section, the momentum that they built through that Forest-style stadium section, which was really, really cool. Apparently, the drivers are already talking to F1 about making the change for next year. Carlos Sainz said he's already spoken to Ross Brawn about it, so hopefully that will help the lap a little bit. But it just meant that even in the closing stages, as Charles Leclerc was closing on Max Verstappen, every time they got to that chicane, he would just lose a bit of momentum. And by the time they got into that long straight, even with DRS, it simply wasn't enough to get close enough to try and get an overtake in. So was it a dud race? I think towards the end we did see quite a few incidents, quite a lot of action, but a lot of that was due to some pretty substandard driving in places. The tyre advantage did come in a little bit, but a lot of mistakes in those final few laps. Valtteri Bottas, he ran wide. He said he was focusing too much on the fight between the two Mercedes behind him that he just ran off the track, let both of them pass in the end. We saw Mick Schumacher and Sebastian Vettel, they had a clash as well. Fernando Alonso, he copped 2 penalties after the race because of track limits. So that definitely did spice things up a little bit towards the end. But overall, I think we did want a little bit more on-track action in the Miami Grand Prix today. But it must be said, this has been a real success for Formula One as an event. I think when we all came to Miami, we were very excited to see what the city was like, how it would embrace F1. And honestly, I've never seen a race like it. I think the whole paddock has really got behind this race. I've been really, really excited to see a new city. And to be, in this warm weather, it's been really, really humid, a big challenge for the drivers. But I think it has brought a bit of sunshine to Formula One as well. I think it's a really good tone to get the season continuing with. I think it shows where F1 is in the US right now, and the star power we saw on the grid. Michael Jordan, David Beckham, Justin Bieber, Paris Hilton, so many huge names coming to an F1 event. It shows that this really was the place to be this weekend in Miami. So it's definitely a really good foundation, and for a first attempt, honestly, I think this is the best first-time Grand Prix that I've ever been to. And I think there is good work that they can do to make even bigger steps forward for next year. If they can get that track surface sorted, I think the racing will be a lot better. The chicane, that might be a bit of a trickier challenge to get a better profile in, but if they can make that change, I think it would give us a big step forward, and hopefully the racing product could match the event product that we've had this weekend in Miami. So what do you think? Does this race have potential? Was Miami as good from home as it was from the paddock? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. And of course, we will see you for the next edition of Paddock Packdown after the Spanish Grand Prix in Barcelona.